There is no decision to scrap the eTolls. That's a fact. The reality that we face is that as government we owe money that we have to pay back. How do we pay back that money? You know, do we charge users, which is what government believes needs to be done? Don't just say you don't want this. How are we going to deal with the reality of debt, number one, and secondly, the reality of having to pay for our very beautiful highways?
Whose bill is it anyway? Are the eTolls back for good? And will the open search for a new head of the MPA lead to justice?
That is the last person we ever want to be captured. We want them to be as slippery from the hands of capturers as possible, because they have an important role to play.
The Politbureau is now in session. I'm Nicolaas Bauer, connecting the dots for you on this Sunday. In the Politbureau today. First up, as the eTolls creep back onto the national agenda, questions continue to be asked about who is really going to foot the bill for the 44 billion rand debt incurred to improve Gauteng's highways. The majority of motorists in South Africa's economic heartland aren't using the system, as only 30% of the province's road users have e-tags.
The average administration costs of tolling systems like this around the world is below 10%. Our research showed 7, 8, 9, some of them at 10 and 1 or 2 over. This scheme, in SANRAL's financials, in their plans, was 27%. Now they say that, well, it was actually 17 because 10% was going to be covered by the punitive cost process. That's nonsense. 27%. 27%. So who's eating? There are computer companies, there are guarding companies, security companies, there are catering companies, there are tens of companies that are feeding into the whole eTolls scheme.
But time may be running out. The South African subsidiary of the Austrian country, a company that brought the system into the province, wants their money, and SANRAL stands on the brink of bankruptcy.
The bill that is due and payable is not necessarily the bill to implement the system. The bill that is due and payable is the fact that when SANRAL upgraded phase 1, they spent 22.5 billion rand in terms of construction work. And that was spent with South African firms, building the Gululis interchange, the 5-lane highways. That is where the initial 22.5 billion rand was spent. Our contract is just over R1 billion to implement the new system, and the rest was actually the development cost of the construction, or the construction cost. The problem that has arose is that through recoveries, through receiving income from tolling, SANRAL has not been able to settle that 22.5 billion rand.
Well, at the same time, the governing party seems at war with itself on the eTolls saga. Just a fortnight ago, the Gauteng ANC marched on the union buildings, calling on government to scrap the system. And in case you forgot, the ANC runs the Gauteng government as well as national government. So not enough people are paying. The interest debt due on the loans to build the roads increases every day. So where to from here? CEO of the local subsidiary of Kapsch, the Austrian company that implemented the eToll system, Connie Vermaak, joins the Politbureau alongside South African Federation of Trade Unions General Secretary Zwelenzima Vavi. Mr. Vavi, we have been, or South Africans have been protesting against the eToll system for many years now, and it looks as though that's definitely not going to change.
Absolutely, and only 30% according to the SANRAL's information itself, which I think is an exaggeration. But only 30% of the users so far are willing to pay for the system, which means 70% of the motorists here in Gauteng are simply refusing to comply with what is clearly a very unjust system imposed without a discussion with the people of Gauteng and this country, which is part and parcel of this neoliberal obsession of our government with neoliberalism, where we are supposed to pay for everything and that the private sector must be brought into every space of our lives.
Bringing in the private
sector. Despite the fact that we are paying so much taxes. We are just too poor to pay for this one, and we are refusing to pay, and we're urging our people to continue to boycott any kind of payment and to force the government to find alternative solutions to the debt that they have incurred from these Australian companies.
Mr. Vavi, you're talking about the private sector. Let's bring that private company in now. Kuni, opponents have always argued that this was not the way to go. And perhaps start by telling South Africa, how did an Austrian company end up implementing a system for 8 billion rand that 7 out of every 10 motorists on South Africa's roads have rejected?
Yes, good morning, Nicholas. From our side is that the regional contract was 8.5 billion rand. That doesn't mean that we have spent that money up to now. Certainly a significant amount less than that was spent. But COPS tendered in a proper tender process with Sunroll. It procured the contract on an open tender basis, and in fact it was unfortunately also the cheapest tenderer at that point in time. I say unfortunately because sometimes the people that make the biggest mistakes are the people that win the tender.
So South Africans don't want eTolls. I mean, actions speak louder than words, and the fact of the matter is that the majority of people that use the Johannesburg and Pretoria highways and byways don't have this device in their car. So what makes you really think that they're going to start complying now because you're making this impassioned plea for them to do so?
Well, I certainly believe that, first of all, there are a couple of misconceptions. The one is that, as Mr. Vavi indicated, that poor people are burdened with eToll. In fact, it's not the case. So public transport are exempt, taxis are exempt, and that means that the vision that Sunroll had as part of this GFIP, the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Scheme, was not to burden the less affluent people. This scheme is designed around getting companies to pay as well as more affluent people to pay, and I think that is the way forward. I think we're also going through a new era where we have to find solutions, and we as the citizens of South Africa have to find these solutions. Nobody's going to find these solutions for us. Government is not going to come up with these solutions, and I certainly believe that it's time for us to step up to the plate, unfortunately, and find solutions in terms of repaying this debt. We end up paying the debt anyway.
Mr. Vermaak, some may argue that government got the people of South Africa into this mess in the first place, and it should be government that finds a way out. But, Mr. Vavi, let's bring you back in here. SANRAL incurred 22 billion rand to build these roads back almost 10 years ago, if not a little bit longer. It's now up to 45 billion. Based on the fact that it hasn't been paid, and interest just keeps on building up. And the longer we don't pay, the more indebted the South African people become. Is this not going to lead us down a road of perhaps Greece, where public services are just not paid for to the point that the country stands on the brink of bankruptcy?
Yes, the principle. We do need the best infrastructure. The roads that have been tolled are the best. We accept that. But here is where we completely reject the government's thinking on the issue. We do not want a system where the best of the infrastructure provided by the government, through whatever agencies that it has, must be provided on the basis of the size of the wallet of individuals using it. We're entitled to the best of infrastructure because we are citizens that are paying our taxes religiously. This thing that the poor must be pushed off to the second-class roads is absolutely nonsense. We cannot accept it. That's the first point. The second point is that we are poor. South Africans are going through tough times.
But Mr. Vavi, the poor people don't pay for eTolls. They're exempted from paying eTolls.
That's a point that I think they are misleading people. There is no adequate public infrastructure for motorists in this country. We do not have an accessible, we do not have a cheap, a safe public transport system. People are forced to buy cars that they would otherwise not need, and they are forced to clock into these highways and to therefore pay. We do not think that it is a responsible step on the part of the government to just willy-nilly, without any consultation, go out, raise 22 billion or promise Austrian companies that we're going to pay 22 billion without any discussion with us, and then impose a system that is essentially about reintroducing of the economic apartheid. Economic apartheid in the sense that those who can pay must pay and must use the best infrastructure. Those who cannot pay, who are poor, who are middle class, and who are traveling between Johannesburg and Pretoria must be pushed off into R101. We are rejecting that, and that's why the call remains. Don't pay until government is forced to look at alternative way of funding and paying that 48 billion.
Let's bring Mr. Vermaak back in here. I mean, there is this conception that this Austrian company Capsch is earning a lot of money. You told me that they only owed 600 million rand. Their contract comes to an end next year. What happens if that money doesn't get paid?
Yeah, certainly what the facts are is that Capsch, in fact, have invested over 800 million rand in South Africa into the ETC business to keep it afloat and keep it alive. And with the current situation, Capsch might not be able to recover all of that money through its normal operations and contract, and that will end up in a loss. So I can actually guarantee the public at this point in time to say that no one single cent as dividends have left the country, and in fact that Capsch transferred technology and know-how to 1,200 South Africans that are fully employed today and are running the system independently.
How do we know that for a fact? Are we just meant to take that at face value?
No, certainly our books are open. SANRAL actually, we have to comply and make our financials available to SANRAL. SANRAL can openly state that as a fact. And we hope that we can also get Mr. Capsch himself to actually soon comment on that in the public domain.
As it stands, 30%. What does the immediate future hold? I mean, do you have a target of getting it up to maybe 40, 50% to make it sustainable? Or are you willing to just carry on with a system that seems to be rejected every single day?
I think what we do need to have is we actually need to find reliable solutions, and that one of those means that we as South Africans have to become a bit more responsible around how we engage with taxes. Certainly, we have some targets and objectives that we want to achieve. I believe that government needs to find a solution for the historic debt. We believe that once we find that solution, we will have a far bigger level of compliance, and then the model work. If the model works, we will be able to create 12,000 new jobs with phase 2. So new roads create new job opportunities, create new investment, and that is what we need as South Africa. We need new jobs, we need investment, and we're in a dire need for that right now.
Mr. Vavi, I'll give you the final word here. We did invite Cosatu National and Cosatu Provincial to join us alongside the Gauteng government. Unfortunately, those invitations not taken up. So I'm going to ask you the question. If the ANC doesn't seem to know what to do with this issue, what's going to happen? I mean, we've got an election around the corner. The knee-jerk reaction for politicians around election time is to make promises that perhaps they can't keep. So, I mean, is this the political football that's going to be played with in the run-up to the election in Gauteng?
Unfortunately so. And that's why you saw this madness of people marching on themselves 2 weeks ago. And that's why I think the Cosatu guys wouldn't come here to debate me, because I would have pointed out to them that if it was not because of their religious and uncritical support of the ANC year in and year out, perhaps this government would have long listened.
In fairness, you were part of the ANC.
Absolutely.
You were part of the Cosatu that supported the ANC.
And when we pointed out that we keep on repeating the same mistake over and over again of complaining and marching year in and year out and continue to ask workers to vote for the same government, NUMSA was the first to be kicked out, followed by hundreds and thousands of other workers who are now finding a new home in an independent, democratic and campaigning federation, SAFTU. And that's history for you.
Well, history
You
indeed.
learn from the mistakes, and you don't just keep on repeating the same mistake over and over, and only to come around mislead people that you are militant and fighting against eTolls, when essentially you're trying to mislead people into believing that you care about their plight, when essentially you don't care.
Mr. Vavi, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you very much to you and to Kuni Favak to joining us on the Politbureau. Are we on a road to nowhere with the eTolls? It certainly seems so at this point in time.